Hey there, boys and girls. How are you? I feel like it's been forever since I have done a screencast. Probably because I have. I hope you had a great spring break. And as you know by now, we have moved on from fractions to decimals. And we've talked about how fractions and decimals are related. And today we're going to be talking about rounding decimals. Now, rounding decimals apply the same concept as rounding whole numbers applies to rounding decimals. So this isn't going to take us too long. There are just a couple of little things that are different. So let's go ahead and title our page Rounding Decimals. And before we start rounding decimals, I want to quickly, and I mean quickly, review the place values of decimals because you're going to need to know these for rounding, because if you don't know your place values, you're not going to know where to do your rounding from. So if I have a whole number, all of my whole numbers are to the left of my decimal. So that means this is 23. So remember, all whole numbers, there's like a pretend invisible decimal right behind it. Now, the numbers to the right of my decimal are my kind of like my fractions, numbers that are not a whole. So if I have my decimal 3762, and that's as far as we're going to go. The way I would read this is 23. My decimal is and then I have to think about my place values. This is tens, should point tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. So I would read this 23 and 3,762 10,000s. You always use the last digits place value. So, like I said, this is my tens place. This is my hundredths. Notice the TH at the end, and hopefully this is all familiar from you when we did this in class. This is my thousandths. And then this is my 10,000ths. Okay, so first step, when we are rounding, we are going to underline, just like we did with rounding of whole numbers, we are going to underline the place value we are rounding to. Okay, so for example, if we're rounding to the hundredths place, let's use that same number. And we want to round it to the hundredths place. I'm going to underline my hundredths place. There's my tenths, so my hundredths is in my 7, is the 7. Okay? The second step I'm going to do. So I'm going to draw an arrow. From the number that tells me what to do. And what to do. That number, I'm going to put this in parentheses, is the number directly to the right. Okay? Directly to the right. Okay, so in this case, if we're rounding to my sevenths, the 6 is going to tell the 7 what to do. Just like rounding 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, let it go. I'm not going to write that because hopefully we've done that so much. If you think you're going to forget, write it down. 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, let it go. Okay, last 2 more steps. 3. We're going to keep the numbers to the left of where we're rounding the same. They are not going to change. So numbers to the left stay the same. So my 23.3, my decimal 23 and 3/10 stays the same. My 7, we need to decide what we're going to do. Okay, so if you need to continue, if I'm going too fast for you, just pause the video and write it. Okay, because we're on step 4. Decide what to do. And when you decide 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, let it go. So 3, 3, 7, 6, 2. So we know these 3 stayed the same. This one's underlined. The 6 is telling it to give it a shove. So I'm going to change my 7 to an 8. So now I have 3, because those have to stay the same. And now I'm changing my 7 to an 8. Okay, my last step is drop everything else. To the right. So once you've changed your number or let it go, you're done. Okay, so when it asks you to round to the hundredths place, your last number should be in the hundredths place. If it asks you to round to the tenths place, your last number should be in the tenths place. And that's it. Okay, so same thing as rounding. The only thing you need to remember is rounding whole numbers, your numbers stay the same to the left. The only difference is on this one, now we're not changing everything to zeros, we're just dropping it. Okay, everything gets dropped. So let's do a practice one. So if I have, and I ask you to round that to the tenths place, I'm going to underline my tenths place, draw an arrow from my 4, because my hundredths place is right next to my tenths place. I'm going to keep my 3 the same, my decimal. The 4 is telling the 7 to let it go, so my 7's going to stay the same. And I'm dropping everything else. I rounded to the tenths place, so my last number is in the tenths place. Okay, there goes the bell, and I don't know why it's still going off in our room, even though it's not time for you guys to leave. You're in computer lab. Okay, and your keyword today is water bottle. I should say your keywords today is water bottle. Okay, so now here's one for you to practice. Let's do 4 and 37 hundredths rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, so you go ahead and do that and then start your video again. Okay, so let's go. I got to keep my 4 the same, count my decimal. I'm rounding to the tenths. My 7 is telling the 4 to give it a shove, so I'm going to change that 3 to a 4, and I'm dropping everything else. So 4 and 37 hundredths rounded to the nearest tenths is 4 and 4/10. Okay, here is another one for you to try, and then I'll give you time to work on your Google form. I'm going to give you 2 to try. Let's do and round this to the hundredths place. I know it's a lot of numbers, but a lot of them are going to be dropped. And then let's do, and I want you to do this one to the ones place. Let's see if we can figure that one out. Okay, to the ones place. Okay, so pause the video and do those two. Okay, welcome back. So my hundredths place. That 8 is in my hundredths place. The 2 is telling the 8 what to do. So I'm going to keep everything the same over here. I'm going to change my 8 to an 8 because the 2 is telling to let it go. And I'm getting rid of all the rest of my numbers. So I am done. The hundredths place, my number ends in my hundredths place. I'm good to go. Okay, 56 and 782 thousandths. Ones place. Same rule applies. I'm going to underline my 6 in the ones place. I'm going to draw an arrow from the number right next to it. Okay, my 5 is going to stay the same. My 7 is telling my 6 to bump it up, give it a shove. So I'm going to change my 6 to a 7. And I'm dropping everything else. I'm done. So rounded to the ones place is 57. Once again, my number ends at the ones place. Okay, so go ahead and work on your Google form. Don't forget